We're doing Mishpatim again. I'm on this compulsive journey to see if you can find a pattern and an order, a sequence to this many halachos and Parshas Mishpatim. So last week, I told you my big idea. When I say my big idea, my point is this is all I told Drush. None of this is Torah 7. This is Drush, Pshetel. But it's the way I sort of envisage the halachos in Parshas Mishpatim, that until im kesef talve, until the halachos of giving milas chasadim, helping people out, milas chasadim, which is yesem and tzedakah, the whole Parshas Mishpatim is about things you're not supposed to do. Now, of course, a lot of the things you're not supposed to do also have mitzvahs asay. Like, for example, you're not supposed to steal, but if you steal, you have to pay. From im kesef talve, the second half of the section of halachos and Parshas Mishpatim, it's mitzvahs asay. That's my big chap, my big idea. Is it true? Probably not. I'll admit it straight up. But this is what how I'm teaching it. And my vision is, my plan is, and you see, you have 4 pages of notes, and I want you to know that since these notes were typed and printed, I've added many more notes, and I'm hoping to finish. To go through the whole Parsha and to identify an order. It's not just a random hodgepodge of halachos, it's an order. And last class, which was a week ago Wednesday, a few days ago, we did 2 sections, right? If you're looking at your sheet on the first page, in the middle of the page you have a title, Dibur LaMoshe, Eved Ivri and Amo Ivriya, and then it says Maki Nefesh. We did both of those. Eved Ivri and Amo Ivriya, the way Chassidus explained is Hashem telling Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not about us, it's about Moshe. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu that whereas, in as much as, since Yidden decided against the plan of Kol Am Hashem Nevi'im, I told you the story, that when Hashem was going to give the Torah to Yidden, he told Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to talk to you and they're only going to witness. And the Yidden said, no, we don't want a sarsor, we don't want an arbitrator in between us, Hashem has to talk to us directly. When Yidden asked that Hashem should talk to them directly, in other words, the Yidden asked that the Yidden should become Nevi'im. So they experienced Nevuah and they expired. They experienced Nevuah and they expired 10 times. And after the 10th time, they said maybe it's a bad idea. And they came back to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, Dabar atei imanu v'nishma. You should speak like what Hashem said the first time. Hashem is going to speak to the Navi, and the Yidden are not going to hear, and Moshe is going to repeat it to the Jewish people. And of course, Moshe was disappointed, meet and call Hashem Nevi'im, and Hashem says to Moshe, head. Yidden are not going to be Nevi'im. They're going to be in a lower world. You're the Navi, but you should know, it's your job to make them Nevi'im, to raise them up. And mitzvahs Eved Ivri is to raise them up to some extent. And mitzvahs Amo Ivriya culminates in what's called Yiyud, where you marry the Shivcha, you marry the Amo Ivriya, which is raising an Neshama of Bria into Atzilus, which is actually giving Yidden Nevuah B'Poyel. So the first 2 parshas of Mishpatim, Eved Ivri and Amo Ivriya, come first, because they're not instructions to the Jewish people, they're instructions to Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu his Inyan, that now that Yidden are not going to be Nevi'im, Kol Am Hashem Nevi'im, they're not going to hear from the Eibusha directly, Moshe has an obligation to raise them up. And after you finish the beginning of the Parsha, which Hashem is talking to Moshe Rabbeinu, you go to the lowest level. What's the lowest thing possible? Murder. Right? Murder on purpose, murder by mistake. And a lot of things included in murder. Hitting your parents and drawing blood, cursing your parents, kidnapping, all of these things are included in the laws of murder. And the last thing we talked about was murdering a slave, an Evet Knaini. An Evet Knaini has a din, Evet Knaini goes to mikveh. Right? They table him in a mikveh. But when the Odein tables him, he has to push him under the water and say, I'm tabling you for Kedushas Evet. Because if the Eved at that last moment jumps to the mikveh himself, he becomes a Ger Tzedek and he's free and he's 100% a Jew. So his Odein has to tovel him by force and he say, I'm toveling you by Kedushas Evet. And then that Eved is b'choyev in mitzvahs kenoshim. Right? He's part of a mitzvah seisha as man grama, but he says do mitzvahs like a woman. So a Evet Knaini is a Yid. And if you kill an Evet Knaini, you're a murderer and you're chayiv mis. Even if he dies over the course of many days. By the way, I forgot to mention, there's one of the mitzvahs that are included in the section of murder is if you try to kill a person, you mean to kill him, and he doesn't die. He doesn't die. So first of all, you put the guy in jail to see what's going to happen. And if the guy recovers, so Yitaka don't kill him, even though he tried to kill him. And when as they have to pay, you have to pay for the damages. If you murder an Eved Knaini has a din of a Yid, you're Chayev Misa. The one exception is the Eved Knaini belongs to you. If the Eved Knaini belongs to you, so then there's a strange halacha called Yemei Yemayim. If the Eved dies within 24 hours, you're considered a murderer and you're Chayev Misa. If the Eved dies after 24 hours, you don't Chayev Misa because it's like Kaspi, because it's your wealth, it's your money. So on Wednesday last, when I was doing this, I was under pressure, the pressure of the yeshiva was standing here and cooking, and I had to go downstairs, so I was very nervous. I didn't have a chance to say it properly. So I'm going to repeat this briefly. The pasuk says, "Lo yukam ki kaspahu." If you beat up your own Eved, and by the way, you have to say the pshat, you try to kill him. Because if you kill a person by mistake, you're chayiv misa. You're beating your Eved with the intent of killing him. Your neighbor beats your Eved with the intention of killing him. If he dies, even if he dies after a week, you're called a tzech and you're chayiv misa. If it's your own Eved, you're beating him and you want to kill him. And he lasts 24 hours, so then you don't kill him, ki kaspi, because he's your commodity, financial commodity. So I came up with a pshat. It's mamish krum shebekrum. In other words, I know it's not true. Huh?
Does he get freed?
Does the Eved get freed? The chayre, if you chopped off one of the Rosh Evorim, he gets freed. I don't know if these are dvarim shel svara. If it's davar shel svara, maybe. But I think it's more gzeres hakosov. If you didn't cut off his finger or poke out his eye or knock out a tooth, then he doesn't get free. But I don't know. Here's my pshat. When a goy buys a slave, when a goy buys a goyish slave, that goyish slave belongs to him only in terms of the work that he could do. We don't say that the goy who buys a goy, I'm talking about in the dinim of Yiddishkeit. If a goy buys a goy as a slave, he only owes him for his shtamshus, for what he could do with him. He doesn't own the body of that slave. Meaning to say, if a goy buys a slave, and he beats him and he kills him, he's chayav misa no matter what. When a Jew buys a slave, it's a weird halacha. When a Yid buys a slave, there's something called kinyan aguf. Not only does he own the hishtamshus, what he could do with that slave, the body of the slave belongs to the Jew. And I would like to argue that this is why a slave is considered a Yid, because when a Yid buys a slave, the goof of the goy, the goof of the slave belongs to the master. Now, if you buy the body of a person, and that not only what he could do for you belongs to you, but the body of that person belongs to you, so the body by itself is not a financial value. The financial value is the work he could do. The body by itself is called in yeshivish and halach, it's called isser. It's not mom and it's isser. A body is a sacred thing, a body is a precious thing, a body is an important thing, and you have to treat it with respect. So a Jew who buys a slave owns not only what the slave could do, he owns also the body of the slave. What the slave could do is considered a financial ownership, and the ownership of the body of the slave is called a more religious, a more spiritual ownership. So if you kill a slave, you chayev misa. So my chap is as follows. If you have a slave, and because you're a Jew, when you purchase that slave, you don't only own the ishtamshus of the slave, you own the goof of the slave. If you beat him, and 24 hours pass, my vort is that in the chelak isser of the slave, there is chelak isser shebe isser, and chelak amamen shebe isser. Meaning to say, you have a slave, you own his goof, but you can't do anything with that goof. You own his goof, but that goof belongs to Hashem. When you beat that slave, and the slave survives 24 hours, Torah says if he lasted 24 hours alive, the spiritual aspect of ownership is gone, and the only thing that's left is a financial aspect of ownership, and that's why you're potter. La yukam ki kaspahu means for the first 24 hours, if you beat him and he dies, you're killing a part of the slave that even though he belongs to you, you're not allowed to touch it. If you beat your slave and he dies after 24 hours, even though you beat a part of the slave that even though belongs to you, you're not allowed to use it, after 24 hours, the only part of that chiyuv that remains is the financial chiyuv. In Hebrew, I'm going to say it quickly. What I'm trying to say is there's mammon shebe isser and isser shebe isser. For the first 24 hours, your ownership is isser shebe isser, and the slave dies, yechayev misa. After 24 hours, the only thing that's left is mammon shebe isser. That's the meaning of the pasuk, ki hakaspehu. The ownership that you have of his goof, After 24 hours becomes only a financial ownership, and you're not chayiv misa. That's my word, and I'm going to move on, okay? The next item on the list is hitting a person and perhaps killing the person, but you don't mean to kill him. You hit a person, you have no intention of killing him. You hit a person, you kill him, and he doesn't even die. You beat it, you hit a person. Okay? So let's turn the page. If you learn to the second page, you read number 11. Okay? In Gemara, there's a very famous machlokes. In the Gemara, there's a question as follows. If you kill a person belay kavana, if you kill the person without kavana, are you chayiv misa or you're not chayiv misa? In this question, if you kill the person without the kavana to kill him, are you chayiv misa or not? There's two questions. One question is, niskaven lare gezeh v'hara gezeh. You meant to kill Reuven and you killed Shimon. Another opinion holds that if you meant to kill Reuven and you killed Shimon, you're chayiv misa. If you didn't mean to kill Reuven, and Reuven died, or you didn't mean to kill Reuven, and Shimon died, then you're not chayiv misa. In other words, everybody agrees if you killed somebody without kavanah, you're not chayiv misa. But there's a shaila if niskaven. There's two halachos in not having kavanah. Actually, the more lenient halacha is you meant to kill a person, you kill the next guy. If you kill the other guy, some people say you're potter, some people say you're chayiv. The other halacha is you didn't mean to kill the person, and either the person died or the person didn't die. In the second case, for sure, you're not chayiv misa. What's the case in our pasuk? A bunch of people are fighting, and no one's trying to kill him, but they're fighting. Why are they fighting? Because they're people, and a bystander gets hurt. A bystander gets hurt. What they call collateral damage. Yinotzu anoshim, and there's a woman walking by, and she happens to be pregnant. Now the details are important, but the details are not the sum total of the matter. Two people are having a fight, and another person gets hurt by mistake. Another person gets hurt by mistake. They were not trying to hit her. They were trying to hit one another. They were not trying to kill. They were simply having a fight. This woman happened to go by. She happened to be in the way, and she got hit. So the halacha is, v'lo yiya'asin. If two people are fighting, even they don't mean to kill, and they didn't kill one another, a woman walked by, and the woman who happened to walk by got hit, and she died. She died. So you have two mistakes, two not intentionals. Number one, you don't want to kill anybody. Number two, you were not even trying to hit her. But there was what's called in Torah din misa. That if you would mean to kill her, and you would actually kill her on purpose, you'd be chayiv misa. So if there would be an saying two people, Reuven is fighting with Shimon, they're trying to beat each other up, not trying to kill each other. If they would inadvertently hit that lady who walks by and she would die, then there's no money. There's no monetary payment. Because that's considered murder or manslaughter. And then you can start kledding about Arei Miklat, whatever the particulars would be. But any time someone is murdered, there's a chiyuv of einish mavis and bezdin. So even if there's no din, there's no actual death sentence because there's a din misa, you don't have to pay. So you have two accidents. A, you're not trying to kill anybody. B, you don't even mean to hit her. If she dies, you're potter. But if she doesn't die, you're chayiv. Why? Because when a person dies, you're not paying for the dead person. The moment the person dies, it's no longer compensation. It's einish, it's a punishment. But if the person is alive, you're paying for the financial loss. And if you're paying for the financial loss, even though you didn't mean it, you didn't mean to hit this person, you didn't mean for this to happen, the woman loses her pregnancies, so you're mechuyev to pay. That's the first halacha of people hurting people without intent. So the halacha is like this. If someone dies, because when someone dies, there's no payment, there is a punishment. So even if you're not going to exact the punishment because it was a mistake, you don't pay. But if nobody died, it's a financial thing. It doesn't matter that you didn't mean it. It doesn't matter that you weren't trying to hit this person. It doesn't matter you're not trying to chas v'shalom have this lady lose her pregnancy. It's a financial loss, and you're mechuyev to pay even by accident, right? When it comes to oinshim, you have to do it on purpose. When it comes to moment, when it comes to financial loss, you pay whether you did it on purpose, you did it by mistake. If you caused another person a loss, you have to pay. That's the first halacha. They're fighting. No one's trying to kill anybody, and the woman happened to walk by. She got hit. As long as there's no death, it's a financial loss, and you have to pay for it. And of course, the chiddush of the pasuk is a woman who loses her pregnancy, so there was a death. The baby died, but the baby is not considered a baby yet. It's still considered a financial loss, and this is why you have to pay. What about abortion?
It's not a baby. It's not a thing.
The whole discussion.
The reason a person is not liable for abortion is because it's a suffix. It's not that the baby is not viable. Is that you cannot put a person to death unless you could prove 100% that baby would survive. And when it comes to a suffix, you don't go basarev. Not by this. You don't say most babies would survive. So if you knew for sure, if you were a Navi and you were able to determine, and you could use Nevu and Halacha, which you're not allowed, that this baby would have lived, then for abortion you're chayiv misa. You're not potter for abortion because it's not murder. You're potter for abortion because you can't prove it. You can't know for sure. You can't know for sure the baby's going to live or not. Now, the next halacha, Rabbi Yisai, the next halacha is, again, you're beating a person. You're not trying to kill the person. So obviously the simple halacha is you hit any person, you have to pay damages. And by the way, I might as well mention this now. And it's a very, very interesting thing. When one person hits another person, there are 5 financial obligations. Right? If I break your wall, I pay for how much the wall cost. If I kill your cow or I hurt your cow, I pay for the damage. When a person hurts a person, when a human being hurts another human being, there's 5 chiyuvim. Nezek tzari b'sheves beishas. Nezek means the permanent damage. The permanent damage. In other words, if I break your arm and your arm is going to heal, so there's no chiyuv of nezek because your arm is going to be as good as new. Nezek means the permanent damage. Tzar means the pain. Ripui means the medical expenses. Sheves means my inability to work. You have to pay workers' compensation. And boishes, you have to pay for shame. There's 5 chiyuvim. When a person hurts a person, and there's no chiyuv misa, there's no din misa, so you have to pay 5 obligations. Let's go it again. Nezek means the permanent damage you did to that person, not temporary damage. Tzar means the pain. Ripi means the medical expenses. Sheves means their inability to work. And boishes means the shame. Here's what's fascinating, and I'm into this even though I've never seen anybody koch this. This is just the way my brain works. If you learn the Gemara Masechta Bava Kama and you learn it in Rambam, you'll see the way the halachos of paying for damages are determined in halacha is to the advantage of the mazik. It's to the advantage of the one who hurt. In American law, people make lawsuits. And they come up with ridiculous sums. You know, someone spilled, the coffee was a little bit too hot and they got burnt, so they sue for damages for $1 million. And the judges give out awards based on how much money the company has, not based on how much damage it was. Wait 1 minute. It's litigation in America is one of the things which is destroying our civilization. In other cultures, there's very different laws of litigation. In Europe, if you sue a company and you lose, you have to pay that company for their legal fees. Which means you have to really decide if it's worth it. In America, you can sue for anything, you can ask for any amount of money, and then the judges decide, and the way the judgments hand out awards is really, really unreasonable. Torah, when it determines damages that you did to another person, they do it to the advantage of the mazik, of the one doing the damage. In other words, by dividing it up into 5 things, nezek, tzar, ripah, sheves, beishas, they actually make it less, not more. Why? This is very important to understand. There's a presumption in a society. There's a presumption in a civilization. That's how we all live together. And the only way for us to live together is if we get along, we're not trying to hurt each other. And there's a presumption that people don't want to hurt each other. People don't meet, sometimes people don't on purpose also, but they don't want to hurt each other. And therefore, when one person, another person, they have to pay takeh. But we do it in a way that's advantageous to the mazik. Even when animals hurt animals, we do it that way. Because Torah says in a normal civilization, people are going to get hurt. It's part of life. So yes, if you hurt another person, you have to pay. But the way the payment system is set up is that we assume that the person who hurt you doesn't want to hurt you. Because in a normal civilization, if people want to hurt each other, they have no society. And therefore it's to the advantage of the mazik. The exception would be a ganav. A ganev or a gazlan, a thief, he's breaking the basic law of civilization. A thief means I'm taking what's yours. That's against law of civilization. But if people are walking in the street and they hurt each other, which is a normal course of life, so there's a presumption that the mazik doesn't want to hurt the nizik. The one who's liable, the one who's accused, didn't mean to hurt the person who was damaged, and you compensate in a way that makes it easier on the mazik, not easier on the nizik. Go ahead, you wanted to say.
I want to say that case, Mr. Coffey, the woman got like 3rd-degree burn, and she asked them just to cover her medical fees, and they refused, and then she took them to court.
I hear. Okay.
I'd like to ask that. Also, it was found out that their coffee was constantly over the degrees that it was caused.
Okay. I stand corrected. I just know that there are, first of all, this is a Q&A issue, and the answer to that question, I don't know. Vashenis, that's one particular incident. There's so many examples of litigation where the judges make awards based on the value of the company. And by the way, that company didn't want to pay for her burns. I'm not saying that they're right, but they're reacting to the craziness of litigation. In other words, they have felt that in order that they shouldn't be sued for millions of dollars, they have to deny any liability. You can make a good, I don't know. Maybe they deserve what they got. But you understand, but in America, litigation, suing people for the craziest thing, some people make a living out of suing people. Especially it's a way to make a living. Lawyers certainly make a living out of it. And it's not good for the civilization. It's not good. Where doctors can't heal because they're afraid of lawsuits. That's what we live in. We live in a world where doctors cannot heal because they're afraid of lawsuits. It's bad. But okay, point well taken. I stand corrected. Thank you for the correction. Now, the next halacha of mazik, of a person hurting a person, so this is a simple rule. If you beat somebody intentionally or unintentionally, if nobody died, it's considered financial. If somebody dies, it's considered something else, and you can't really pay for it. If nobody died, it's considered financial, and you have to pay. Shoin. There's one case that's an exception to this rule, and that is when a master beats a slave. Same principle. If a master beats his slave, and he causes a specific type of damage, there's what you call in Torah gazera sakosov. A gazera sakosov means that this is not a logical law. A person beats his slave. The halacha says if he dies after 24 hours, you're not chayav misa. That's also not such a logical law. But the law that we're now dealing with is called the halacha of shen va'ayin. You beat your slave to pulp. He doesn't die, there's no liability, he belongs to you. If you chopped out his tooth, you poked out his eye, and of course the Gemara says it's not just an eye or a tooth, there's chavdad rashi evadim, the 10 fingers and the 10 toes and the nose and the reish hagvia and the eyes and the teeth. So he's chafshi, he's free. You knock out his tooth, you knock out his eye, he's completely free. This is a gezerah sakosov. Why? Because you can hurt a slave much worse, and the slave shouldn't go free. If you take off what's called the rashi evadim, one of the edges of the evadim, there's a gezerah sakosov, that the slave goes free. So it's a halacha in mazik. It's not killing a person, it's one person damaging another person. It's an exception to the rule. You don't pay for it financially, there's no dollar amount. The slave goes free. Go ahead.
What if you let's just say, cut off your slave's hand, so he's free,
Because they cut the fingers off. Okay, interesting. I'm not so sure what the halacha is. It's the din by Rashi Evarim. I don't think he goes free. You cut off his hand. You cut off his hand, finger. He goes.
Cut off his fingers, and he dies from those wounds.
Oh, so then it dies from those wounds. So then the din of 24 hours applies. 24. What the Gemara discusses is if you poked out his eye and you chopped out his tooth. So for the first one, you don't have to pay because he goes free. The second one, you have to pay because he was already free, and you're arguing which happened first. Because an eye is a lot more valuable than a tooth, yeah? So the slave says, first you knocked out my tooth, and then you poked out my eye. And the master says, no, first I poked out your eye, you knocked out your tooth. So what do you do in those cases of sfeikis? The Gemara. Our good friend, the Gemara.
When he's free, he becomes a Jew, right?
100% a Jew, yes.
So then, once it's a Jew, would you be, and he dies, wouldn't it be a harsher punishment than if you were to kill the slave?
No. Because you have to make the halacha based on the condition that happened at the time you did the action, not when the effect occurred. Okay, Rabbi say, so far, we have two areas of Torah that we discussed. A person killing a person, with intent or without intent, and a person hurting a person, with intent or without intent. And if you hurt a person, you have to pay, and by a slave, there's a din of shen v'ayin that the slave goes free. What's the next halacha? An animal kills a person. And it makes sense, right? First you have a person killing a person, then a person hurting a person. The next halacha is an animal killing a person. And in animals killing people, there's also a series of halachas. And by the way I put it in my collection, I joined together an animal killing a person, and an animal killing an animal. Number one, if an animal kills a human being, so the big chiddush is, this is not a din in moment, this is din in isser. If an animal kills a person, we do not say there's financial liability. We do not say there's financial liability. Just like I told you, when a person hurts a person, he pays. When a person kills a person, he doesn't pay. Even though killing a person is much worse than hurting a person. Why? Because when you hurt a person, your whole liability is financial, so you pay it. You kill a person, your liability is on a different level. And once, in the language of the Gemara, you go over from moment, from financial need, to isser, to what's called the category of things that you're not allowed to do, so you don't pay. It's true by an animal as well. When an animal kills a person, there's no financial liability because it's considered murder. It's not, an animal doesn't kill necessarily on purpose, although the Gemara indicates that for an animal to kill a person, he has to try very hard. For an animal to kill an animal is easier than for an animal to kill a person because the person has what's called a mazel, and an animal doesn't have a mazel. But when an animal kills a person, the Torah says it's considered an act of murder. There's no financial liability. The owner of the animal's potter. But the animal has to be stoned. The animal has to be destroyed. You're not allowed to have anah from the animal. The animal called a shoyra niskal. The animal has to be stoned. Now, why are you stoning the animal? Because he's a murderer. He's an animal. He's an animal. He has no seichel.
The embarrassment of the owner of the animal.
Oh, no. The embarrassment of the person who was murdered.
What?
You're killing the animal for the embarrassment of the person who was murdered. And I'm going to give you the extreme example of this. You know the story of Bilam? You don't know the story of Bilam? Bilam had a donkey. And the donkey saw a malach. And Bilam did not see the malach. So because the donkey saw the malach, he was trying to avoid the malach. He was going out of the way. He went into a field. He backed his foot into a wall, whatever the case is. Bilam hit him 3 times. And then the Eibishter opens up the eye of Bilam, and he sees what the donkey sees. He sees the malach. Right? And Rashi even says, animals don't have seichels. When they see a malach, they don't freak out. People have seichel. When they see a malach, they're liable to freak out. So the malach was able to see what Bilam was not able to see. You know what? What a person not able to see. You know what Rashi says between the lines? If you look carefully in Rashi, after this maaseh with the donkey and Bilam, and the donkey basically embarrassed Bilam. The donkey sees the malach. Bilam doesn't see the malach. Then Hashem allows Bilam to see the malach as well, and the malach has this whole conversation. The malach killed Bilam's donkey. The malach killed Bilam's donkey. You know why? Not to embarrass Bilam. Not to embarrass Bilam. The way, I forgot how the pasuk goes, the malach said, I should kill you. I shouldn't kill the donkey because the donkey was trying to help you, but the way it works, when an animal exists, that his presence in this world would be shame for a human being, there's a halacha that the animal has to be killed. That's the reason for Sheira Niskal. When an animal kills a person, you're killing the animal so that you shouldn't be able to say this animal brought death to a human being.
In that donkey, Avram's hand is going to be Mashiach?
The donkey, Rashi says the donkey was killed by the malach, so he's going to have Tchias HaMeisim, he's going to come back, he's going to be the donkey of Mashiach. I don't know.
How did the donkey embarrass the donkey?
How the donkey embarrassed Bilam? Bilam is a Novi, and the donkey sees what Novi doesn't see. And there were people around. It wasn't like it happened in isolation. So this is the reason for Sheira Nisko. Okay, and the Sheira Nisko is Asr Ba'ano. Now, but if your animal kills one person, and before you have a chance to kill this animal, it kills twice more, the animal becomes a Sheira Nagach, becomes a Sheira Mu'ud, so then the owners have to pay. When the animal kills the first time, there's no liability to pay. Why? Because it's not considered a financial loss, it's considered Isser. Someone died. If it happens twice, if it happens 3 times, then the Balabais has to pay, and he's not paying. So it's called kafir. He's paying to redeem his own soul. In other words, really, the owner of the donkey, the owner of this ox should be killed, because if his ox killed 3 times and he didn't protect people from his ox, so he's guilty of murder by allowing his ox to kill other people. It's considered kafir nafshe. And of course, it's considered a knas. This liability is considered a knas, not a moment. It's not a financial liability. It's a penalty, and it's a penalty for not looking after his animal. So this is the third halacha in the Parsha, when an animal kills an animal. Okay, now, and the same is true, of course, the animal kills a child or an adult, it makes no difference. What happens if the animal kills a slave and a maidservant? Again, a gzeres hakasuv, if an animal kills an eved or an amma, you pay shleishim shkalim. You have to pay 30 coins. It doesn't make a difference if the eved is worth much more. It's from gzeres hakasuv. Okay, now, is there any other way the wealth of a person, is there any other way the wealth of a person could kill? Right? The person has an ox, the ox walks in the streets. If the ox has a temper or something happens to the ox can go crazy, it can gore somebody and kill somebody, right? Is there any other way that the property of a person can kill a person?
Yeah.
Huh?
If
It's the same thing as an ox. An animal killing a person, yeah. What's the other way?
if he steps on something sharp or he slips on his property.
Okay, very good, very good. So what did you just say in yeshivish terms?
I don't know.
You said boir,
Oh yeah.
right? Boir. Boir. You step on a sharp object, person left in the street, that's called boir b'shas harabim, right? Boir is a funny halacha. You dig a pit in the street. It doesn't belong to you, because the street doesn't belong to you. But the Gemara says there's 2 times that a person is chayiv to pay for something that doesn't belong to him. One of the 2 things, this is the big machlokes Rav and Shmuel, chometz b'Pesach doesn't belong to you and you're chayiv koros, and beir b'shus harabim doesn't belong to you. You make a pit in a public, you dig a pothole in the street, and somebody falls in and gets hurt. It's legally not yours, but financially it's yours. You have to pay for damages. And what's the halach of a pit? If an animal falls into that pit and the animal dies, it's the same thing if an animal gores an animal. You're chayiv to pay for the death of that animal. Now, what's the connection? We speak about an animal killing a person, right? You say an animal kills a person, so there's no liability for the death of the animal has to be stoned, correct? Then you say, if you open a pit in the ground and a shayr falls in and the animal dies, you have to pay. What's the connection between the 2 halachas? Anybody want to take a guess? If you learned Bava Kama, you should maybe be able to guess. What's the halacha about boyd? You're good.
4 fathers of damages.
The halacha of boyd is, thank you very much, sheir v'layadam chamer v'laykelim. If you dig a pit and a person falls in and he dies, you're not liable. If you dig a pit and kalim fall in and they break, you're not liable. So there's a very direct continuation. An ox kills a human being, you don't pay for damages. You dig a pit in the street, if an animal falls in, you'll have to pay for it because it's considered a financial loss. But if a person falls in, you'll be putted. And that's how I'm explaining the hemshech. The reason boir b'shas harabim follows sheir the reason the halachos of a pit in the street follows the halachos of an ox who gores and kills a person is because when an ox gores and kills a person, you're not mechuyev to pay for the person who died. When you dig a pit in the street and a person falls in the pit and dies, you're not mechuyev to pay for that person who died. You're only mechuyev to pay for an animal. So that's the smichos of Parshas. I told you in the beginning that my endeavor, my wish, my hope, my plan is to show the continuity of the Parshas. So the continuity is like this. It's the Torah puts boyer b'shos harabim after shoyer, not because you're mechuyev for a behema, but because you're potter for another. And just like by shoyer, right, when an ox kills an ox, you have to pay. When an ox kills a person, you're potter. When a pit kills an ox, you're chayiv. When a pit kills a person, you're also potter. That's the continuation of the halachas. That's my word. That's my pshetel. And then comes the third halacha. The first halacha is an animal kills a person. The second halacha is, and again, I'm saying it in the way that serves my purposes, a pit kills a person, you're also potter. But if an animal kills an animal, you're going to be mechuyev. If a pit kills an animal, you're going to be mechuyev. The third halacha is when an animal kills an animal. If an animal kills an animal, but this is considered financial. If an animal kills a person, you're not mechuyev, because it's considered isser and not mumin. An animal kills an animal, this is considered financial. It's a financial loss, and you have to pay. And of course, you guys know the two halachas. The two halachas are that you have to remember that world, right? You talk about dogs walking in the streets. You see, people own dogs and cats. They walk in the street. In those days, people owned goats and chickens and cows, and they walked in the streets. And most of these animals, most of the time, are tame, are docile, they're placid, they're not violent, and they're not angry. So it's very, very difficult to hold a person responsible for an animal to do something destructive if it's against its nature. Later in the Parsha you can have where an animal eats your food, then it's normal. It's normal for animals to eat food, so you have to pay. But for animals to hurt other people or animals is against the nature of, we're talking about domestic animals, is not natural. And because it's not natural, a person is not liable for allowing his animals to walk the streets, because animals walk the streets, it's normal. So the halacha becomes that the first two times you pay what's called chatzi nezek, you pay only half, and the chatzi nezek you pay migufa, you can only pay it from the animal that did the damaging. In other words, you can end up paying even more than half. But if you did it 3 times, you're mechuyev to pay for the whole thing. Why? Because if the animal did it 3 times, you should know better. And in the Gemara, there's 2 opinions, whether it's on the owner or it's on the animal. The animal has proven itself to be violent, or the owner should know that he has to watch his animal. But that's the third halacha. So Rabbi said, we're going to stop now. I'm going to stop right now. I'm just going to summarize what we learned tonight, okay? What we learned tonight is, the first thing we learned is about a person hitting a person and not killing him. A person hitting a person and not killing him, it's automatically a financial loss. If it's a slave, there's a separate rule. The second halacha that we learned is an animal killing a person, and a boyer b'shos harabim killing a person. That's how I'm spinning it, even though it doesn't say in the pasuk. When an animal kills a person or a pit kills a person, there's no liability, because it's considered isser. When you kill a human being, it's not considered a financial loss. It's considered a much more serious thing, so that you can't pay for it. But if an animal kills an animal, or damages an animal, or damages a person, so then there's liability. And the last thing we learned is when an animal kills an animal. So when an animal kills an animal, the presumption is that animals are not violent. So for the first 2 times, you're potter in moment and you're mechuyev in knas. And the third time, then you're mechuyev to pay moment. Okay, so if I have to summarize what we learned, we've so far in this Parsha discussed 4 themes. The first is the instructions that Hashem is giving Moshe Rabbeinu. The second is murder of a human being. The third is a human being hurting a human being. And the fourth is an animal killing either a human being or an animal. And in Mitzvah Hashem next time, we'll continue. Bli neder.